jobs. But if you look around and pay a little closer attention, you will notice that Joe Biden's political support is in the process of collapsing completely. The new Marist poll is out. It shows that only 29% of independents support Joe Biden. That is a very bad number. How bad is it? For perspective, in the last election, Donald Trump took 41% of independent voters and lost. So if you're a political consultant, a poll that shows 29% independent support sends you immediately to the liquor cabinet for more vodka. It means your candidate is going to lose along with everyone who's connected to your candidate. You're looking at this tsunami forming on the horizon aimed at you. It's terrifying. But for Joe Biden, that's just the beginning of the bad news. That same Marist poll shows Biden at 33% among Hispanic voters. In other words, 67% of the so-called Latino community does not support Joe Biden. It's hard even to process a number like that. It's just too far from the conventional view of American politics. Is there a single political analyst in this country who would have predicted that even last week? And no, there is not. The one thing we have always known about Latino voters is they're Democrats. And they're Democrats because they understand that Republicans are racist. Period. Upon that assumption hang all the Democratic Party's hopes for the future. Now we learn it isn't true. It's not even close to true. In fact, it's approaching the opposite of the truth. So how are Democrats going to respond to this new reality? Look for CNN contributors to start attacking Hispanics, just as they've been attacking whites for the past several years. They've got a new enemy now, and it speaks Spanish. In the meantime, you really cannot overstate, because it's literally impossible to overstate, the level of panic a poll like that must be inducing at the Democratic National Committee. If the Democrats aren't the party of non-white voters, which is what they've said they were, probably even what they thought they were, then what are they? It turns out Democrats are exactly what they appear to be. They're the party of neurotic, personally unsatisfied white ladies who live in the suburbs. You know those preachy little signs you see on the lawns of affluent neighborhoods telling you how the people who live inside love BLM and support Tony Fauci? That's the real Democratic Party. It's not a national political party. It's a professional class cultural movement that is highly unappealing to normal people. In a functioning democratic system, people with those little signs on their lawns would never be allowed to run anything because nobody likes them. The advisors around Joe Biden understand this perfectly well. If these new polling numbers are right, even if they're just sort of right, this is the end of the Democratic Party as a governing majority. It's bewildering to think that. But political parties, like markets, often seem strongest right before they collapse. The problem is, at this moment, the Democratic Party is still in power, and that's a very bad combination for the rest of us. Regimes in decline tend to become dangerous. As they weaken, they get increasingly desperate and ruthless. They've been rejected by voters. Democracy doesn't work for them anymore. That means they can no longer operate within democratic boundaries and hope to stay in power. So inevitably, they swerve outside those boundaries. Instead of trying to convince the public to support them, that's democracy, they invent domestic enemies and national panics to keep themselves in charge. And that's exactly what we're watching happen right now. As of tonight, in this country of 334 million people, there are no confirmed deaths of the Omicron variant of COVID. At the same time, just this month, many thousands of Americans have passed away from heart disease and cancer, suicide, diabetes, murder, drug ODs, not to mention car accidents, Parkinson's, emphysema, Alzheimer's, asthma attacks, choking to death on lobster in crowded restaurants, just to name a few causes. Lots of people still die in America, but they are not dying of Omicron. No one in this country is. And yet it's Omicron that our leaders and their vassals are suddenly hysterical about. Watch.
And I think we're really just about to experience a viral blizzard.
Have you heard infectious disease expert Michael Osterholm say that we're about to experience a viral blizzard?
One expert now warns of viral blizzard as the country braces for a viral blizzard.
There will be a viral blizzard of COVID cases.
The country is facing a viral blizzard.
A COVID viral blizzard.
A viral blizzard is about to hit the U.S.
One infectious disease expert saying a, quote, viral blizzard is about to hit this country.
What is this stuff? Well, it's a viral blizzard. Is viral blizzard a scientific term? Well, as you just heard, it was coined by someone who calls himself a scientist. But actually, this is not the way scientists talk. Scientists don't make up phrases for political effect. They don't design language to be as frightening and imprecise as possible. That's not science. That's politics. That's what politicians do. In the case there's any remaining doubt that what you are actually watching is a coordinated political campaign, consider for a moment who's getting infected with this new viral blizzard. Ground zero for new COVID cases right now is New York City. That happens to be the most vaxxed city in the country. In New York, you can't have dinner without proving you've had a shot if you want to leave your house. At this point, most New Yorkers have. They've taken it, both because they're required to take it in order to live a normal life in their hometown, and also because they were told endlessly by CNN and this country's health authorities that if they got vaccinated, they wouldn't get COVID. Now they learn, sorry, just kidding, thousands of them just got COVID anyway. For what it's worth, we're not attacking New York when we tell you this. We're not even attacking the vaccines. We're just telling you the facts. This is real, it's happening. And it's interesting. So what rational conclusions can we draw from what we're seeing? At this point, none. CNN doesn't want to talk about the COVID outbreak among vaccinated people in New York. They have to correct too many lies that they told. And in any case, there are more Democratic voters in New York City than anywhere else in America, so there's no reason to embarrass the base of their own party. Instead, CNN and its masters in the Democratic Party have identified the real villain to blame for this outbreak. And you will know, even before we tell you, that it's not Pfizer, it's not the government of China, it's America's working class, a group now known as, quote, the unvaccinated. On Thursday, Joe Biden informed us that these people will die for what they've done.
It's here now, and it's spreading, and it's going to increase. For unvaccinated, we are looking at a winter of severe illness and death for unvaccinated. For themselves, their families, and the hospital they'll soon overwhelm.
It's hard to remember ever in our history an American president saying something more dishonest, crueler, or more divisive than what you just heard. In a functioning system with an effective opposition, which we do not have, Biden wouldn't be impeached for that. Everything about that statement, which is essential, it's about this global pandemic, everything about it is a lie. The unvaccinated pose no greater threat to the vaccinated than the vaccinated pose to them. And if they do, Joe Biden, why don't you tell us how they do? But he can't. No one can. That's why they never explain it. In fact, there's quite a bit of evidence that the millions of Americans who've recovered from COVID and have natural immunity are safer than most people. They've relied on their own immune systems, and they've been rewarded for it. Joe Biden has never once acknowledged that these millions of people exist. As for Biden's claim that the unvaccinated are overrunning hospitals, it's hard to believe he would even say that. First and most obviously, these are American citizens. They have every right to use American hospitals. They pay for those hospitals. This is their country. And as of tonight, they are not overwhelming those hospitals, in point of fact. And by the way, since we're on the topic, here's a question. Do the unvaccinated, quote, overwhelm emergency rooms more than the, say, millions of illegal immigrants that Joe Biden has just admitted into our country? Do they overwhelm the hospitals more than the drug addicts and the mentally ill living on our streets that the Democratic Party so faithfully subsidizes? No, they don't. This is a lie. This is all a lie. And it's a very scary thing for the leader of the United States of America to be saying out loud, but you can see why he's saying it. You know what's happening here. Biden's COVID policies are a measurable failure. More Americans have died from COVID under Joe Biden than died under Donald Trump. That's not some Republican talking point. It's the truth, and you can look it up on the CDC website. That's the bottom line. It's a very hard number to ignore. So Biden's advisors want you looking elsewhere. And to get you looking elsewhere, they're working to create a Kulak class, a group of reviled subhumans that the rest of us are free to hate and mock, and whose deaths we're allowed to root for. That's the unvaccinated. When David Frum tells you we should let the unvaccinated just die, he's not alone. That is now the official position of the Democratic Party. If you get COVID and you're unvaccinated, it is immoral for you to go to the hospital. You're overcrowding it. And we need that space for the many people who've taken the COVID vaccine and are now sick from COVID. That's what the President of the United States just said on Thursday. It's at this point that if it all wasn't so dark, you'd probably pause and laugh, because it's also genuinely hilarious. Take the vax so that when you get the disease it's designed to prevent, you have a right to go to the hospital? It's insane. Senators Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren announced the other day that they have COVID and are now in quarantine. And of course, we wish them the best, sincerely. But you can't help but notice that between them, Booker and Warren have had at least 6 vaccine injections, and now they're sick. So what is the lesson here, exactly? Well, the lesson that Eric Swalwell is drawing from all of this is that unvaccinated Americans should be banned by law from flying on airplanes in their own country. He announced that last night on Twitter. Now, the airlines disagree with this. They thought a lot about it. So does any sane physician. They have too. But Eric Swalwell, who's probably the most physically unclean member of Congress, now imagines himself a public health official with the power to make these decisions. So before we go any further and grant Eric Swalwell that power, we probably ought to see his medical records. It'd be kind of ironic if a guy with multiple chlamydia infections was lecturing the rest of us about how to keep safe from a virus. We await that data. In the meantime, whatever personal decisions about the vaccine or COVID or how many masks you wear, if any, know what you're watching here. This is not a public health campaign designed to save you from a variant that has not killed a single confirmed American. Sorry, it's not. No, what is this? These are the muscle spasms of a dying political party. The people in charge are on their way out. Unfortunately, they can still hurt you. Dr. Scott Atlas is a former coronavirus advisor at the Trump White House. He's the author of an amazing new book called The Plague Upon Our House. He joins us tonight. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on. There's something about the hysteria over a variant that as of right now has had no death toll in the United States, especially when combined with no guidance whatsoever on how you might get treated for this were you to get it. You get sick. What do you do next? They won't tell you. Makes me so uncomfortable I can barely stand to watch it. What do you make of this?
Well, you're right, Tucker. This is an extension of everything I saw and wrote about in my book. And that is a complete lack of critical thinking, a shocking lack of critical thinking. When we have a variant, as you've mentioned this here, the Omicron variant, there's a disconnect between the cases and the serious illness or death. That's good.
Right.
There's a lot of cases, there's projected to be more cases, but there's not going to be, so far, we have not seen the deaths. If you look at South Africa, they've had it for over a month, and they're seeing that this is very mild. Okay, this is good news. In fact, this is how pandemics end. What's stunning is that there is no word of this expected good thing happening at the end of a pandemic from Dr. Fauci. The leaders of public health here instead keep repeating what they've said before, which is keep locking down, keep issuing restrictions and mandates. And those policies, by the way, were implemented widely across the entire country, and they failed to stop the infection. They obviously don't eradicate the virus. They also failed to stop people from dying as they were implemented throughout the entire country in 2020. And they don't admit it, but they, even worse, destroyed millions of people. So what we're seeing is, again, a repeat of everything we had before, a lack of logic, really a total denial of science here.
May I ask you just to unpack something?
Can't be tolerated.
Well, it's scary as hell, but really quick, will you explain something that you mentioned a second ago? You said, what we're seeing, widespread infection, low cost, no deaths, very few serious illness, that's the end of a pandemic. What does that mean exactly?
Well, everyone who's a competent doctor knows that as a pandemic evolves, the viruses mutate. The mutations allow the virus, or the ones that keep being contagious are the ones that survive, but they're less lethal. And as we get to a stage, it's called endemic, where there's a relatively constant or little ebb and flows of infections, but very few deaths, that is when there's no more pandemic. The pandemic is not about infections that are not harmful, okay? The pandemic only matters if the diseases are very serious or cause death. If you don't have that, and you just have a lot of people getting a very mild infection, that shouldn't panic anyone. That's in fact showing that there's either a very, very mild virus, which isn't a big problem, or there's enough immunity and protection against the severe consequences that we're good. And so that's how the pandemic ends. The destruction of the pandemic, if it's not lethal and not causing serious illness, really should make people feel good. It shouldn't be a cause for panic. It's the opposite.
Thank you for explaining that. I haven't heard anybody say it as clearly as you just did, and I'm grateful for that. And it should give us all hope, as you just said. Appreciate it. Dr. Scott Atlas, thanks.
Okay.